and gather in the car park at the rear of the building. The meeting is being recorded and will be streamed to YouTube. Therefore, any members of the public present should be aware that they may be recorded even if they are not participating in the meeting. If this causes you any concern, can you please let me know now? Okay, thank you. In that case, we'll proceed with item 1. Apologies for absence, Stephanie?
Thank you, Chair. We've received apologies from Councillors Andy Sully and Councillor Derek Perry.
Is anybody aware of any others? Sorry, well, I think he's on leave, is he? I think so. Oh, yes, I seem to remember. So it's Councillor Mansell. Have we heard, anybody heard anything from Rosemary? No? Okay. Okay, well, we'll move on. Okay, so minutes from the previous meeting was 26th of August. I know it was a little while ago, but they were included in your pack. Is it your wish that I sign them as a true record of that meeting? Can I see a proposer, please? Thank you, Habiba. Seconder. Thank you, Stephen. And all those in favour? Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you, Norman. And right, that's good. I'll sign those. Thank you. Item 3, declarations of interest. Any declarations? Councillor Farberhide.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was interested in our item 5. At some stage, I was interested in the meal house within the establishment of Orchard Grove, but I have no more interest whatsoever on the same site. So I just thought I'd mention it just in case. Thank you.
Okay, that will be duly noted. Nick O'Donnell, Councillor O'Donnell.
Yes, when it comes to item 5, do we need to declare that we're also town councillors? And I'm also a town councillor because I noticed they've raised an objection.
Your town councillor position is recorded as a matter of course, as they are for a Councillor Cavill. Norman.
A declaration of interest in item 6, pecuniary interest, but the item is only for report.
Okay, indeed it is. Thank you. Any other councillors? I'm not seeing any others. Okay. Right. Public question times. I'm not aware of any. Stephanie, are there any? No?
No public registered to speak.
In that case, we'll move on to the meat of our meeting with item 5. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I hesitate to raise it here, but I don't see anywhere else on the agenda to raise it. Could it be confirmed whether or not we are actually due to be having a meeting next month or not? Because it has appeared in the diary as a meeting and also as cancelled. We've had a cancellation notice for it.
It's a meeting on the 16th.
Yes, there is a meeting.
There will be a meeting.
We have had a cancellation notice.
I think something funny happened because there was a cancellation that went out for Planning South as well, and there's South and West on the same day, on the 16th of December. So something happened with scheduling, but there are meetings on the 16th of December.
Okay, well that's very helpful to know. Thank you. But as I say,
thank you for that, because that was starting to get confusing. Zach.
Chair, through you, I just want to say we do have at least 2 or 3 sort of significant items that we would be wanting to bring to the 60.
I know that's sufficient to hold a meeting, and we do need to hold that meeting to comply with 8 and 13 weeks.
Well, it may be just as well then, Mr. Chairman, to confirm that the meeting is taking place.
Can I ask Stephanie, can you please send a note out to planning committee members? I appreciate most of us are here, but some of us aren't. If we can get a confirmation note out.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you. That would be really helpful. Okay, any other things before we move on to the meat of our day, which is the planning application item 5 on your agenda, which is 42/24/0033/NMA, Orchard Grove Land at Comet Road, Troll, Taunton, and the presenting officer is Simon Fox. Good afternoon, Simon, and welcome.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So this is an application for non-material amendment to an outline application for amendments to the approved plans to allow for alterations to common infrastructure at phase 2, including drainage, attenuation basins, retaining structures and earthworks, site remodelling, engineering works and landscape planting at the site known as Orchard Grove, the Cometro garden community, which you'll by now hopefully recognise via this red outline signifying the full extent of the site. Today's focus is on this sort of middle part of the site. So you can see from the earthworks on the aerial imagery, that's the part of the site that's currently being worked on to deliver the spine road through. You can see the Orchard Grove Church, which is, I think, based at the primary school at weekends. And this is slightly out of date, but it shows the housing having started in the northern part of the site, now coming down across the site towards Troll. So the area that is concerned by this NMA is the area roughly circled in red. Without the benefit of a site visit and slightly relying on members recalling from site visits that have been conducted in the past, these next few slides seek to illustrate the nature of the site that we're looking at today. These are Google Earth 3D sort of representations which seek to illustrate that there are levels differences within the main single field that comprises the Southern Peninsula to phase 2. It's tilted towards the remainder of the allocation. So this is the green wedge between the two parts of the allocation. So this yellow arrow basically signifies where this bottom view is taken from and where this top view is taken from. And it's to show that the site is not level by any means. It's falling away in different directions. It forms a high point in the general landscape. You can see here there's a fall off here towards a property called Grassy Rivets. There's a fall away here to the former abattoir site. And like I say, the land around the abattoir forms the green wedge that's part of the Cometro garden community site. The levels are important, and this is an aerial photograph before the site was started. So this is the A38, and this is where the roundabout now is at the north end, and then the spine road goes through the site towards the Gammington Stream and over to where the primary school is, which is in this location. Today's application is for effectively this field here. You can see that there, and you can see the abattoir now on the other side of Lip Hill Lane, and the application extends into this area here. But even on this image, you can see that the land is falling away in various directions, and that's why any application for land remodeling, regrading is of particular interest and needs particular scrutiny. Again, just to sort of further illustrate the topography, this is a much more recent image from May, which shows the care home which this committee permitted, which is now actually having its roof put on. But again, it's this field here that we're looking at here, and you can again see that it's falling away in different directions. So hopefully that's given a sense. The wider area is crisscrossed by public rights of way. On this image, the site that we're looking at is this field here, sandwiched between Higher Cometro Farm and Lip Hill Lane and the abattoir. You can see here from the topographic information on the OS survey that the high point is in this corner and it falls away in different directions. This is the land use plan that is approved as part of the revised outline. It shows in a tan colour here, the buff colour, the extent of approved residential development and green space surrounding that residential area. You can see that there. This is the green infrastructure plan. This shows again green space around the outer edges as part mitigation for building on high land, and to provide obviously the requisite quantum of green space for residents to enjoy. This is the approved master plan, which is a refinement of detail from the previous two plans. This shows the intention at the time to lay out a massive residential development surrounded by these outer parks. Let the press take a photo. And you can see the right of way here that runs actually through this field. So it extends past the abattoir and then through the site and then through Higher Cometro Farm up to the A38. This was then the next evolution of plans was this plan in 2019, which was a phase 1 infrastructure application. For those who recall this from the Somerset West and Taunton days. So what this did is it took the whole of the western neighbourhood and it basically set out a series of parks and green spaces to accommodate the attenuation basins. And you can see here from the brown lines, this was all the land remodelling that was required across the site to provide developable land platforms for the housing. To also facilitate that, there were a series of retaining walls, which are the brightly coloured lines that you can see at various intervals. Sorry, there's a box that's appeared on the screen to where I'm going to point. And there's a series of retaining walls which retain land that has been reprofiled. And this plan also included several roads so that the chainage of those roads could be established. And then the subsequent, so that was all approved. The subsequent RMs that we've dealt with, of which there have been numerous now, leading to about just over 500 approved residential dwellings on the site, meant that they could slot into effectively these land parcels and this framework. So all the open spaces in the, or the main open spaces in the western neighbourhood were designed at this stage and all had detailed plans. This was that same plan, but minus the green spaces, which shows in more contrast the retaining walls that were required across the site to provide those developable platforms. So in the area that I'm most concerned about, which is this southern peninsula, for the reasons that have hopefully become evident through the photographs and images that I've showed, is the slopiest field. And because of that slope, it is particularly more prominent in the landscape than perhaps the rest of the site. And the approach in 2019 was to raise part of the site, reprofile the site, and install retaining walls to provide those developable platforms. And there was also a long sort of sausage-shaped attenuation basin that was proposed. This little area here, I think, was a little localized raised bit that was being reduced in height. This is how it looked in a sort of heat image. The reds were reductions. The darker greens were increases in elevation. So you can see even in this area, there were significant areas of land raising to create those platforms. And that shows that in more detail there. Obviously, the oranges, including the basin, were areas that were being excavated, but they weren't as excavated as the red area here, which was being removed, which was being reduced in height quite considerably. So alongside all that land releveling and reprofiling, like I said, all the open spaces were designed, and we've already looked at some of those open spaces that have been refined since 2019. And I think there was a committee in, I want to say April, May, where I presented 3 items, one of which was the redesign of the Mill Pond area. effectively, this is what was approved, this long attenuation basin. You can see this is a detailed plan showing the detailed landscaping for what it was. Coming down round opposite the abattoir here, landscaping, and then some larger woodland groups around the southern edge. This was the Millpool area that we approved earlier this year. And this is now what's proposed. So effectively, the lower part of the mill pond or Millpool area has only been redesigned insofar as the attenuation basin will now hold some water permanently. This basin over here will also now hold water permanently. So those are the substantive changes with these two basins. This area of open space along here was shown as some sort of meadow cum wildflower area, but the practicality of a long, thin, narrow area which was likely to be backed on by houses has led us to just plant that up with trees to reinforce the existing treed corridor that exists along Lip Hill Lane. And then the corridor along the old farm track here to Higher Cometro Farm is the hedges are to be retained with more tree planting. The substantive change, though, is when you go back down into this large single field alongside the abattoir, where the basins have effectively been broken up into smaller basins. So we've now got two rather than the long sausage-shaped one. And you can see here, in contrast to the previous plan, the amount of landscaping that's now included. So there's dark green woodland groups with individual trees in. The basins again are retaining water. We've got the paths and the walkways going around. The central feature through here has been enhanced. That's effectively the right of way corridor, which will be a green space that houses probably look out over, become a feature of that part of the site. And then going down around the bottom, we've got a third basin, and this landscaping has been re-augmented to provide that. I can't call it a screen because it won't ever screen the houses, which will come later, but it will go some way to diffuse the otherwise angular view of a line of houses that would likely present looking out over the landscape. So just to reiterate, the approved plan for this basin is on the left and the proposed plan is here. The main difference is that retention of water. Similarly at the Millpool, it's a sort of spot the difference, but the main difference is the holding of water in the top image, which is the proposed plan. And then similarly coming down into what's called Gamington Valley or Cometro Lane Path or Hilltop Meadow, you can see the approved plan on the left against the finer grain now detail shown on the right hand side. And there's significantly more landscaping in this edge here than there was under the proposed edge that you can see along here. Hopefully that speaks for itself. So whenever we're looking at land remodeling, we're not actually so concerned about the land modelling in of itself. What we're concerned about is the houses that are going to go on top of it. And that's the one thing we don't have the substantive detail of. So these sections have been prepared based on what's actually being proposed now under this land relevelling. But the houses that are shown are only for indicative purposes. We obviously still have the detailed applications for those houses still to come in the probably not too distant future. And that's when we get the next opportunity, the following opportunity to review and assess the landscape impact of those houses on the wider landscape. Because the planting of trees and this land relevelling in of itself doesn't have a substantive landscape impact at all. It's the houses and obviously all the built development that goes on in behind this, which will. But what these sections seek to illustrate is that with any land relevelling, you give a bit of height. But what we've tried to do is we tried to put the landscaping on the same plateau as the housing. So it's not sat 3 or 4 meters below the level of the house and takes, 10 years to even get to the foundation level, we are putting landscaping up at the level where that diffusion of the built form will be maximised. That's not to say that the other tiers aren't landscaped, they are, and it all provides part of the foreground and the mitigation that forms part of this overall landscape approach. But you can see here where there are houses, there are trees close and at more or less the same level, so that landscaping does actually have a full impact. And these are the sections now going up the lane, just to show that in some places we're squeezing up against the lane a little bit more. And you can see that, for example, here's the lane. We've got the existing roadside hedge, which will come under management and be allowed to grow up a bit taller. And then we've got 2 or 3 areas of planting with a basin here with more planting. Similarly here, this is the narrowest, so we've got substantial beds of planting that allow that landscaping to establish. Again, the top basin there, so that's this cross section here. So to further try and ensure that we are preparing the ground quite literally for housing to be delivered later on, the applicants undertook some more modelling works. So this red area is obviously our area of interest, and selective viewpoints were chosen which coincide with public rights of way. And there were various images taken from those viewpoints whereby the effect of the landscaping and of a modelled roof height could be seen. Now, there's some minor differences when you knock this one onto the next one, which is after 5 years and then 10 years. So, in fact, I've gone a little bit further, and this document basically shows that there's some science to how they've arrived at basically this drawing here. So, the top image is the existing baseline, so a photograph taken as of today, say, and then the bottom image shows how the impact of the landscaping that's proposed as part of our scheme has matured, or has obviously grown on in 15 years, and what that would look like if a parameter was taken of a consistent roof line. Now, the next stage, when we get to reserve matters for the housing, is to then augment the actual houses onto this plan so that we can see precisely where the roofs are, where the gaps are, and what landscaping we can put within the parcel of the housing so that it all is as mitigated in terms of a consistent line of houses, which is what we don't want. We want to have diffusion, we want to have gaps to ensure that the landscape impact is as mitigated as possible. This is then the next view along, which again shows the existing baseline, and this is to the south of the parcel. You can see that little ridge there, which is where the site is. Below here is the property that I mentioned earlier, Grassy Rivets, and the bottom image shows the effect of that landscaping in 15 years' time. So there's absolutely no suggestion here that housing is not going to be visible when it's first built. It's going to be very visible. However, the whole landscape approach will be that over time, the landscaping will diffuse that view, and the tricks in the reserve matters application that we later deal with will be looking at roof tile colours and facing materials to ensure that we're not sort of putting maybe orange roof tiles on a bright rendered property, for example, and sort of saying, hey, look at me, that we use sort of materials that mean that those houses recess back into effectively that horizon view. So in terms of update to the report, there's been extensive consultation with the LLFA, who have no remaining concerns following those discussions, subject to the review at the RM stage, where obviously we have more detail about the extent of hard surfacing and therefore the amount of water that then needs to be held in the basins. but there's been a very fair assumption of what the built area will be in designing the basins that are now shown before you. But they have asked for an additional condition, so that's proposed. And there's also an amendment to the new drawings list to include the drainage information that has led to that LLFA position. As we speak, there are no comments that have been received from the Highway Authority. Having said that, I wasn't necessarily expecting any, given the nature of the proposal that we're looking at. The Somerset Wildlife Trust were consulted but haven't responded. But the Public Rights of Way team have been consulted but haven't commented yet. And I do believe that their comments are important to understand before we make a decision. The material planning considerations are that it is a non-material amendment application, that the public open space, the attenuation basins and the land modelling scheme was first approved in 2019, and these are revisions to it. And in my opinion, this is a better scheme to those elements that are relevant to this part of the site. But because of the lack of the public right-of-way team having commented yet, I'm reluctant to just press on and seek your full and final approval of this application, subject to the additional LLFA conditions and the updated plans, because the right-of-way, as I say, runs through the site and it will require diversions. And I'd rather the right-of-way team understand what the implications of that are and are able to add any additional conditions or informatives before we issue the decision. However, you can only wait so long, and therefore I said if they do not respond within a week after me chasing them, then we issue the decision, having had the chance to participate in the application. That only seems fair and reasonable. So yes, the recommendation is that the NMA be granted subject to the stated conditions and subject to no adverse comments from the Rights of Way team. Thank you.
Okay. First councillor to catch my eye was Gwyl Wren.
Okay.
So, and then Stephen Pugsley, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Interesting one, isn't it? I mean, I think non-material amendments are a very useful tool in the planning officer's arsenal, weapon in the arsenal, I suppose. But it's interesting that this is being referred to the planning committee, which it already sets up in my mind an area of doubt as to the level, because inevitably a non-material amendment has to be judged on fact and degree. And in this particular case, we are looking at landscaping impacts, but we're also looking at drainage impacts. And when I first read the papers, I thought drainage, I really don't see how site drainage can be regarded as non-material. It seemed to be far more important than that. Having now got into it and seen that actually the drainage scheme is pretty much as it was, and there's been a bit of shape shifting, and I'm really interested to find out the rationale for holding water in it, because I love holding water. I think it's brilliant. It's really good for wildlife and things like that. But it's the kind of things that gives people the screaming abdabs over the danger and risks and all this kind of stuff. So I'd be interested to know why the guidance has changed to allow this rather than drain the site completely. That's the first thing. Moving on to the details you talked about a tree belt taking over from the wildlife meadow, and I take the point about the wildlife meadow being thin and narrow, and the soils aren't there, probably not adapted to wildlife anyway, quite rich. But I did wonder about the tree belt. If it was close to the edges of the houses, at some point it might cause a conflict, say in 20 years' time, if they got a bit too high, because they're going to be to the east and the south, and there is a risk, of course, that there will be shading. So I don't want to know how that's been taken into account. The other thing is, of course, the cut and fill, which is another big element of this, which inevitably means that large parts of the plot, the field is the plot, will be made up ground. Now, I don't like made up ground because made up ground is always a bit soft. And so if the intention is to build houses on it, then clearly they're going to have to be carefully designed and the foundations are going to have to be good. That's a problem for the builder, but it's something I think we do need to bear in mind if this is being regarded as non-material. And I think that's where I'm always coming back to. Is it of insufficient seriousness for us to allow it to go through without detailed scrutiny, and I'm still sort of whirring that round in my mind. The other thing is trees. Trees are heavily in this. You put trees on made up ground, and you don't water them properly because you're talking about putting in big trees, I suspect, fairly big trees. You don't want the things to die on you, because my recollection, and I've always had a beef about landscaping conditions, which only last for 5 years. And so if you stick the trees in made up ground, the made up ground drains readily. And in a summer like we just had, all your trees are going to start dying, and this is a major problem. And if it's only going to be for 5 years, it's going to start looking very gap-toothed. So I'd like to know, after the 5 years, who is going to be responsible for beating up, replanting and ensuring that the condition is actually maintained. Because I think if you're serious about putting a landscape condition in, screen it from view and all this kind of thing, you want it to be permanent. You don't want to say, oh, it's only 5 years and after that, forget about it. So which is, as you can see, the whole non-material thing is slightly weighing on me at the moment, but I'm very interested to hear what Mr. Fox has said, because I'm sure he has weighed it very heavily in the balance, and we all know about balance from this morning, don't we?
Mr. Fox, would you prefer to answer questions now or at the end?
It might help others if I answered this one.
Yeah, I
first,
think
perhaps.
it might. That might not be a bad idea. So if I could ask you to answer that, we'll probably jump the gun afterwards and make some suggestions.
Yeah, so the reason this application is before you is that this site has enjoyed the scrutiny of this planning committee and previous iterations, and so it's almost become, irrespective of other schemes of delegation and whatnot, that the written rule, or the unwritten rule, should I say, is that every application of substance comes to this planning committee. And therefore, members of the public have the opportunity to see that the development of a major scale is being properly scrutinised. There are obviously a few applications that have been delegated, but I think they are effectively substations and very ancillary things that have been discussed with the chair that wouldn't warrant your time in this forum. So whether it was a full application, a Section 73, or an NMA, it was going to come to committee. The added impetus was given by the fact it was an NMA, but full public consultation has taken place. Members of the public have been notified, site notices have been displayed, and as you've seen in the report, the town council and the like have all had an opportunity to comment. But at the heart of your question is about the process element to this, and an NMA is a tool that we can use, but it has to be used in an appropriate manner, and that is a matter of judgment, and it's a matter of scale and the extent of the change being proposed within the context of the entire site. So in some cases, an NMA could be relative change that's being made wouldn't constitute an NMA, because it's a big change in relative terms to, say, I don't know, if you had a planning permission for a house and you wanted to NMA the height of the roof, that probably wouldn't be an NMA because it's absolutely sort of central to the house, So that would probably require a new application. Whereas in this case, against the backdrop and the drawings that I showed you, that all of these areas have been approved with land remodeling, they've all had attenuation basins, they've all had landscaping plans. What we're doing via this is effectively tweaking those arrangements. We're not adding in housing, we're not adding in anything else of any substance. So the main tenet of what it is that we're doing is the same. It's just the nature of it has changed, and it's a relatively small part of the site. There's tens of hectares of other land which is not affected by this. So on balance, it was felt that an NMA could be considered, but the sort of rules of engagement over that was that we wouldn't just do it behind closed doors, as NMAs generally are dealt with, but they'd be dealt with in full public view There's nothing to hide here. It's been there for full public scrutiny, and therefore, as with any decision, you have to make a decision mindful of any potential challenge that might result from it. And I think, we're content that it's an appropriate mechanism, and the underlying planning conditions from the outline still bite. We've added some extra conditions which will also bite. So over and all, and obviously we've got a better outcome, in my opinion. So for all of those reasons, that's why we've proceeded along the way we have. Having said that, you may have noticed that the application has been in for a while. And that also signifies that this hasn't just been turned around. This could have been turned around in weeks behind closed doors. It hasn't been. It's been negotiated, debated, assessed, negotiated over all of that period of time to get to the result that we've got to now. So that's why I feel, as I always do, feel able to bring that to you today. With regard to the basins, the holding of water, I think that has simply come as a consequence of phosphates. So there are some phosphate benefits in being able to hold water, and also a slight change of view from the developer in terms of the placemaking objectives. So there was not ever a policy that prevented it from council's point of view. I think we do encourage it. But there are obviously capacity issues where you hold water, in that you reduce the capacity to hold more water. And therefore that's been the issue over time. And we've ended up with developers sort of maybe pushing back on digging ever deeper or bigger, or their biggest concern is wider attenuation basins, which eat otherwise developable land. So maybe an odd influence in terms of phosphates that actually had some positive placemaking impacts in this case. Whether it will continue through the remainder of the site as phosphates issues sort of ebb and flow, and I couldn't say, but holding water is generally a good thing for a number of reasons. It does bring, of course, the health and safety issues that you raised, and that comes down to a management issue about how you try and design that out the best you can. The tree belt, I've just flashed up this image which shows that. Perhaps slightly looser in my language, how we envisaged this was like a woodland edge. So there will be a gradation of species and planting that comes back down to the residential rear boundaries. So we're not envisaging large trees being placed immediately on the back fence. It's all native stuff, but you can see the layout here grayed out, and this layout is indicative, but it shows a direction of travel on the developer's part to back housing onto this area. And so it felt to me that just having a strip of landscaping on the back of properties wasn't going to be a good thing from a security point of view. And actually what we'd be better off doing is, and this plan shows it, it's fenced off effectively each end, and it just becomes a woodland edge. So it's basically that sort of understory planting that you would typically see gradates down from the trees that are in the existing hedgerow, which are high above Lip Hill Lane, and just brings that down to a modest height. So, something around the 2 to 3 metre mark just above the boundary fence. Cut and fill. I mean, the long and short of it is that we've already approved cut and fill on the majority. Well, we have on all over the site. You can see from the aerial photograph that I showed right from the outset that there are areas of cut and there are areas of fill, because that cut material has literally just been ploughed down the hill and then a retaining wall put in front of it, and that's created a platform. So, yeah.
The trees are now long life more than
Yeah,
anything.
I mean, we've got conditions on the outline about the landscaping, but I think it's always true, but it's more true here, that watering regime is going to be absolutely imperative, because we see lots of tree failures. I mean, we're not necessarily immune to it as a council in overseeing tree failures in some of our roadwork schemes. That watering is really important, and that's going to be something that I'm going to have to sort of keep on with all the time. because it's something that can easily fall away from people's minds. The one thing that might sharpen the developers' minds is, of course, they're under an obligation to replant any that fail. So you'd hope that that is an incentive enough. The long-term management of the open space is discussions continue with Taunton Town Council, and what that does is it sets in another safeguard whereby upon transfer that land has got to be transferred in pristine condition, and therefore those trees have got to be viable, and if they're not viable they've got to be replaced at that point anyway. So and then it's down to the town council's management thereon as a responsible body to establish those trees. So I think there's reasons to be optimistic that in the end, if the town council do decide to adopt green spaces at Orchard Grove, then the long-term management I think is secured. I think that's okay.
Very helpful, thank you.
Okay, thank you. In an attempt to assist this, I'm going to make a suggestion for consideration. I'll bring Stephen in just a moment. I've got a list of councillors who want to speak, but in terms of trying to reach a conclusion on this, I'm going to suggest that we increase the landscaping commitment to 10 years, not 5, because so much land has been moved and there is such a danger to those trees if they are not looked after properly. And second suggestion I'm going to make is that instead of we suggesting 7 days, as Mr. Fox suggested, for rights of way to get back, we make that 14 days, but that's just because I think they're pragmatic answers to the questions. I'm now going to move around my list, but I've got 6 councillors who want to speak. So, Councillor Pugsley.
Would it be possible just to hear Mr. Fox's response to your suggestions, Mr. Chair?
Of course, no problem at all.
The landscaping issue, the 10 years, I'd need to check the outline, because it's the outline consent that holds those types of conditions, and I can't change that. But I'm thinking about my general approach is to put 10 years on, and I'm asking myself, did I put 10 years on when we had the opportunity, when we revised the outline 2 years ago, I think it was. I mean, we can condition these trees with another condition if it transpires that the rest of the site is covered by 5 years and then this is by 10. Then you'd have to sort of explain why that's the case. So my inclination is to either stop sharing my screen and go look at the planning decision on the outline and see if it does say 10, or to push back on the 10 and say, well, we've got a condition on the outline that says at least 5. So the other tool that we use when it comes to laying out open space, and if there are sort of slightly large individual specimens, is you always have the opportunity to go through with a TPO, because if the trees do take on a wider landscape function, i.e. they're not just there for the sake of it, they are there to perform a function, and they have significant amenity value, then a TPO is perfectly suitable tool that would basically group the whole site basically and would preserve all the trees thereon. It doesn't stop them dying from drought, but what it does do is it ensures that they have to be replaced, which by inference then means that there's an incentive to stop them dying in the first place, because they become ever more expensive to replace as they get larger and mature. So you've got a couple of tools there that you could use, but I'm very happy to look back at the outline approval if you are happy for me just to spend a minute or two doing that. As for the right of way issue, I mean, I think that's for councillors to guide on. I mean, I've said 7 because they've had 4 or 5 already. It's like, how long do you go on? Obviously, the rights of way situation is not like many others in that they have another bite of the cherry later on. So there are mechanisms whereby, once the right of way needs to be temporarily closed or diverted to suit the layout of this new layout, then the rights of way T comes in under their own regiming process. And that's why I thought, well, it'd be useful to know what they did think but it's not necessarily imperative. It's not like they don't have another opportunity later on to majorly influence the outcome here through their own legislation. And they've had relatively a lot of time, yeah. Maybe.
Well, sorry then, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy for Mr. Fox just to check on the issue about the number of years. I have to say, having read the report and having heard Mr. Fox's presentation, I'm very much focused on paragraphs 1117 and 1118. And I was therefore very happy to actually move the recommendation, subject to any further comments from the Rights of Way team. So I would like to put that there. I hear what you say about possibly adding further years to the tree issue. And I'll wait to hear from Mr. Fox. And I may therefore seek to change my recommendation slightly, but nevertheless, in the meantime, I would like to move the recommendation. However, the cynic in me wonders why we go from 1118 to 13, and was there something really interesting in paragraph 12, which has been denied us?
I don't think you're a cynic, Councillor Pokes. I think you're a realist. Okay, next councillor on my list is Nick O'Donnell, please, Nick. I'll come to Andy Sully in a minute.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a small observation because I was looking through, I noted being a town councillor, noted the objection of the town council over its lack of information on the water discharge or poaching rate, particularly in relation to SUDS attenuation basins, and looking at the lead local flood authority, which led me to an email you received from the lead local flood authority last month, looking about C4 Basin being updated to FEH 13, and I was wondering why it's not FEH 22, which is now the new modelling. It's at. I was wondering whether we should have a look at FEH 22 rather than 13 and get just more up to date, accurate information.
Looking at the certificate, it's a long certificate by reason of the nature of the outline that was approved.
Okay.
There are various references.
Email.
There are various references to 10 years in the landscaping.
It's not. It's in the original.
With respect to the drainage issue, so I was trying to look and listen at the same time. I wouldn't pretend to know the difference between all of those things that you've just said.
No.
What I do rely on is the fact that I facilitated discussions between the LLFA and the applicants, and then became embroiled in a game of email ping pong as various figures and data were being thrown over the ether to answer all the various concerns from the LLFA. So, as was stated on the slide, the LLFA have come to a position where they're happy enough. But of course, we've got basins that we don't know what we're draining at the moment.
No.
And therefore, they've been worked on the basis of a development area being a percentage of hard standing and various events and intervals creating the water that would need to be stored. The next check is once we've got the housing, we know the roads, we know the amount of impermeable space, then those calculations we run again. You'd like to think that the basins have been sized appropriately. If they haven't been sized appropriately, then they'll have to be revised again to cope with the quantum of water that's necessary. But of course, there are also interventions within the parcel of the housing that can be done to reduce the water getting to the ponds, like water butts, permeable surfaces, that we don't know what the impact of all of that is at the moment. So
I'm just aware that FEH 13 is modelled based on rainfall that was up to 2005, whereas FEH 22 is based on rainfall
Okay.
that's fallen up to 2020. And I was just recommending that actually we use FEH 22 rather than
Okay.
13.
I can't dispute that. All I can say is that's what the LLFA have asked to receive in terms of data.
Okay, councillor Farberhide, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is not too dissimilar to Councillor O'Donnell. The attenuation basin have overflows normally. That's my understanding. And it has to discharge somewhere. So my little concern is, are they likely to discharge into the lip lane because that's next to, the attenuation pond? And what mitigations do we have to actually avoid some of these water flowing into the abattoir in anticipation that potentially there might be some development at later dates? So how do we avoid that? And how do we actually get the overflow to go from where it is to Gulbington Stream? Have we allowed for that, or are we likely to allow for that? What are the implications to that? The other thing is, from my understanding, and these attenuation basins, from time to time, they need cleaning up. So, and overpopulating them with trees and shrubs and everything else at some stage will impede that. So, are we actually looking at that as well? Thank you.
So the basins work as a series of like a necklace, effectively. So the water will go into each of the ponds and then cascade through the system and will ultimately be discharged into the Gulbington Stream. So they're modelled not to overflow into existing residential areas or into Lip Hill Lane. So they will discharge out into the Gulbington Stream. So this one here, for example, this one here will discharge into that one, will discharge into the next one, will discharge into the next one, and then into the Gulbington Stream. And also during construction, there is the condition that I was seeking to impose is about the drainage scheme during construction, where this site is then stripped and is just topsoil. So there's an interim drainage scheme that will also ensure that existing residential properties are not affected. As soon as then those basins are put in, then they can start forming part of the finalised drainage network. Yes, I mean all the ponds on the site will require levels of maintenance, likely desilting on a sort of maybe a 10-yearly basis. There is a schedule that accompanies the drainage strategy that sets out what sort of routine maintenance is, which would be things like removing branches and debris around the head walls, for example, so the water can actually get out the pond. That would be one way it would overtop if it was physically blocked, all the way through to the desilting of it, on a sort of 10-yearly basis, or however long is necessary. If it doesn't need doing, then it doesn't need doing. Or if it needs doing sooner, then and this is part of the advantage of having proper management of these spaces, which I believe the town council would deliver, because what you don't want is a arm's length management company just following a pre-prescribed schedule and not doing anything reactive. Whereas I believe, more local management would mean more responsive management. It's worth saying, just in terms of like the volumes and everything else, that obviously we did approve attenuation basins before, and this response is is taking that on. So it's probably not that we ever would have, but we're not relying on the 2019 basins because they were too small. They've all been made larger. So this is an up-to-date, better scheme in drainage terms than the 2019 one was, which could have been implemented in some way. It all goes a bit back to front because it probably wouldn't have, because we would have had to relook at it when the housing came forward. But do you know what I mean? These things do evolve because of these opportunities that we have to relook at the specifications.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move to Councillor Andy Sully online. Andy, welcome to the committee. And then after Andy's had a response to his questions, we're going to go to Norman Cavill.
Thank you, Chair. Now, I'm happy with the presentation that Mr. Fox has presented today. I've got a question, but it's not really, it's to do with the site. I've obviously many times recently been to Wellington, and on the way I look at the site and I see the park and bus, and it was finished in the summer, and I'm just wondering why it's not up and operational. It's just sort of lying idle now. I would have thought we would have sort of got whoever is responsible to take it on in terms of the bus company to go in there to I see Mike's got his hand up, so hopefully he might be able to answer that question. Thank you. That's all I had to say. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Rigby, is it in direct answer to that question, or is it another matter?
It is, Chair. I've been chasing this for some months now. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good. I've been chasing this for some months. I had another exchange of correspondence with our legal department yesterday, and I understand that the land needs to be transferred to Somerset Council before we can operate the park and bus. That's expected now on the 3rd of December, which by my reckoning is next week. And I've asked our parking services and transport team to give me a plan for how we then intend to open it. So I'm hoping with a fair wind that we should see the park and bus car park. The buses are already stopping in at the bus stop, but the car park should be operational this year, and I'm happy to give the committee an update as those plans firm up over the next week.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Rigby. Did you have any further questions whilst you're online?
No, that was all, Chair. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Right, in that case, on to Norman Cavill. My apologies for taking Mike Rigby in between.
Oh, don't worry. That's fine. Thank you very much. Questions have been covered, but I'd like to just add one or two things in. I noticed Mr. Fox said that perhaps trees dying, the developers would take notice of. I'm sadly to report that out in Monkton Heathfield 1, with some cut and fill, minimal compared to this, they did not take notice of and replaced 2 or 3 times. And the comment when asked was, once planted, they don't need watering. So I hope there is some insistence somewhere that there is a watering scheme planned, because unless it's planned and nailed down, it won't happen. The other thing is water also that I'd like to comment on. I am highly delighted and very pleased to see water retained in ponds. It's been one of the main arguments that I've had for some time. Simply because we've been told to think like a city, Mr. Chairman, for some time. Hard surfaces produce heat. They do not provide a good environment. Those ponds will provide a microclimate. We've seen what last summer can do. More than ever, we need to keep water around the place, not just to provide that microclimate, but also to give it a chance to soak back into the ground. Thank you.
Right, that's the last of the questions and last of the comments from councillors I see at the moment. I'm not seeing anybody else moving in. So the proposal is that the recommendation is that we approve that. Now, Councillor Pokesy, are you still happy after the conversation that has been had? Okay, so I need a seconder for that now. Thank you, Norman. And so that's been seconded. So I would like to go to the vote now, ladies and gentlemen. If we can vote those in favour, please. That's unanimous. That's unanimous. That's unanimous. So thank you very much indeed. Right. Okay. Excellent. We'll move now on to the Simon Fox show this afternoon. So we're going to move on now to item 6 on our agenda, which is 14/21/0047, which is land east of the A38, south of Walford Cross, Monkton Heathfield. And this is to receive an update report on the application for outline planning permission with all matters reserved except for access, comprising up to 1,450 dwellings and 4.91 hectares of land for employment uses. and 8 hectares for a school, a mixed use. So I'm going to move to Mr. Fox.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I suppose first an apology that this update hasn't come sooner. The last update, which followed, I think 3 updates previous to that, was this time last year. But with it being a month to Christmas, I thought I'd bring you a early present. Not a good present, there, really, is it? Basically, this year, since the last update, where I had maybe optimistically forecast that we would be back before you in the spring with a report, soon became clear that that wasn't going to be possible because there was need to nail down the highways package for this scheme, which is obviously extensive. And there were also ongoing discussions about financial viability. So of all the issues that have been pertinent to this application, we had 2 that really have persisted. And we've spent the last year effectively, going through those issues, obviously the highway elements with highways colleagues, and development viability, which is a negotiation, has its ebbs and flows. You have to each party needs to sort of assume a position, and then you discuss that position. And that's all been done quarterly over the last 12 months. We are in danger of making another forecast. We are moving forward, and it's with more certainty that I can say this application will be presented during the spring of next year, one way or the other. The report is being written now, and so that's why I can say with more certainty, because I'm actually doing something that leads to the end. The viability matter is not concluded, and obviously as a negotiation, I don't really want to go into where we are exactly with that. You want to disclose your tactics, do you? Especially if they're not going to disclose theirs. So that's where we are really. I mean, I have got, just as a refresh, obviously that's the red line of the site for 1,450 homes. This was the master plan that was presented in September 22. Which had the reasons for refusal, and this included the outer relief road. The site's been rebranded as Langala Park, and this is the master plan, which hasn't changed at all, I don't think, or changed very, very, very minutely since September last year, because it's not this that we've been negotiating and debating. It's can we afford everything that the council is asking for in terms of planning obligations. And there has been a need. There's been a greater need, I would say, for dialogue with the parish councils, for example, because taking the last site as an example, around public open space management, we don't want this to go to a private manco, and the administrative area for this site is West Monkton Parish and Creech St Michael Parish. So, and they have very different views on life in terms of managing facilities and just things. So, and our SIL regime doesn't particularly help in that conversation. There's a large amount of SIL that's payable. So there's a conversation as to whether this site is exempted. There's the level of affordable housing that the site can deliver, which obviously all members want to see as much as possible. But we've got some very, very substantial weighty infrastructure elements here. And, this is what's taken the time to try and work out, what the allocation needs, what this site needs to deliver as part of the allocation, and how much all that costs and how you go about affording it based on, say, only 1,450 units, but that will only achieve so much income and that's obviously got to be balanced with the outgoings. So that's the exercise that's been going on. It's taken far longer than anyone would have wanted on both sides of the fence. However, you know, it's all been done in good spirits and with a view of trying to resolve this conundrum, and it will all be presented in the fullness of time when we come to planning committee next year. So if one is needed, the recommendation is that members note this update and see you in the spring.
Okay, thank you. Now, I do have a public speaker listed for that, Mr. Ian Jewson. Mr. Jewson, you are more than welcome to come to the public speaking desk and make some comments if you wish to. Okay. Okay, well, thank you for that. I didn't want you to think you've been ignored. Okay, thank you. In that case, councillors, questions for Mr. Fox? Gwil.
Thanks. You say you are writing your report, but you seem to give a fairly clear indication that there are some relatively weighty, substantial matters outstanding. Can you just elaborate on how far you've got and how far you need to go?
Yeah. So as you will know in my reports, there are chapters and volumes to it. So there are parts of the report that will be dealing with things like ecology. Now, ecology isn't impacted by viability or highways. So those parts of the report can be written. The substantial number of neighbour representations that we've received can be summarised and assessed without impact. You know, they have a little bit more impact on those aspects, but effectively you can do a lot of work. At the point where you go, okay, well, what am I recommending? I'm not at that point. But of course, the prevailing subtext, all of this is an allocated site. The council doesn't have a 5-year land supply, and the 5-year land supply that we do have moving forward over the next decade, which is obviously really important in terms of the pipeline, will be predicated on houses coming out of Monkton Heathfield Phase 2. So that's not to say that it's just an approval for those reasons alone, but of course, as you read more and more appeal statements, you know that those things are coming to the fore more and more and are overriding more and more issues that would otherwise have been single concerns in planning applications. So look, I think the council set out its stall. It wants the site and the allocation delivered. But you know, I go back to my normal mantra, it's got to be right. Yeah, it's got to be right. And it's not quite right just at the moment, but you know, we're working towards it. There's a lot more right about it than wrong, which is where we weren't 2 years ago.
And you're confident of being able to close the gap?
Okay, any other comments? Any other questions for Simon? Okay, well, I'm happy from the chair to propose that we note the report. I have a second. Thank you, Stephen. And can I see those in favour, please, noting the report? That's excellent. That's all of those able to vote. So that's unanimous again. Okay, that's excellent. Right, we move on to the appeal decisions now. So I'm going to turn to Zach. Just as an aside, Simon, would it be helpful if the parishes of Creech and Monkton merged? Would that make your life easier? Well, quite. Yeah. The people of Monkton and Creech.
I wasn't prepared to make a statement on this, but I think the governance review will bring about a number of questions,
right,
Chair,
okay.
of which, of course, I'd have an opinion on.
I wasn't aware that was in our gifts or your gifts as members, but yeah. Appeals. So there's quite a few in there, and obviously you'll have seen some of the appeal decisions. So I'm not going to go through them word by word, but the first one's an interesting one. It's an appeal that's been lodged recently. We don't have a determination yet. but that's at Cheddon Road and it's for 112 dwellings. This is an appeal on non-determination grounds. Officers had delayed bringing this to committee pending the outcome of the Green Wedge review. I think we've mentioned that at previous meetings. That's now being undertaken by a company called DAC on the council's behalf. But rather than waiting for the outcome of that, we did try and negotiate with the developer to hold their appeal in abeyance. But they've made a commercial decision that they wanted to go to appeal. And so the final decision now rests with the Planning Inspectorate. Having said that, we are intending to bring a report to you as the West Planning Committee on the 16th of December. And we'll be asking members to resolve what you would have decided had you still been in a position to make a formal determination. So you won't actually be making a determination, but it will certainly help us in terms of how we approach the appeal process, any areas of key concern, and it will help us in the preparation of a statement of common ground with the appellant. We have negotiated an extension of time with Planning Inspectorate to enable us to bring it to that committee. They had asked for us to send through statements before the date of the committee, and we basically said, well, we believe it's incumbent on them to let members have a say, and so that's been agreed, and our statements are due, I think, 3 days after the date of the committee. Yeah, so that will be coming to you on the 16th. Okay. Then we have a slew of applications, appeals at Kingston St Mary. The first two, they're all of these were dealt with by the same inspector, by the way. So we had a number of decisions coming through at the same time. So we've got the erection of one dwelling at plot 22, Mill Meadow in Parsonage Lane. That appeal was dismissed because the inspector felt the proposal's not in a suitable location for market housing regarding the development plans, so unsustainable location. But the inspector actually put more weight on the fact that they couldn't conclude the development would not add to the unfavourable phosphates levels within the habitat sites, and that the harm associated with these matters attracts substantial weight and outweighs the benefits of delivering one additional dwelling. The next appeal was on exactly the same matters, exactly the same proposals, but on plot 23 at Mill Meadow, and not surprisingly, the inspector came up with exactly the same conclusions: unsustainable location for a new market dwelling, and harm in terms of phosphates not outweighed by the benefits of one dwelling. The next appeal relates to Cuckoo Lodge, 7 Mill Meadow, so similar part of it, different part of the site, and it was a variation of a condition that actually linked the occupation of lodges to tourism only, and removal of any lodges after 12 months of being vacant. Regrettably, the appeal was allowed. The inspector did acknowledge that it would introduce an open market dwelling in an area that's not easily accessible, and that occupants would be heavily reliant on private vehicles. So noted this unsustainability, but noted that when compared to the approved second home use on the site, the extent of this would be modest and any harm would be limited. Felt that the benefits as a whole outweighed the harm, and that the removal of the conditions would not result in significant harm in planning terms. The next appeal was exactly the same, but related to Heron Lodge at 9 Mill Meadow, same conclusions. And the next appeal related to plots 5, 6, 8, 10 and 12. Again, removal of the tourism occupancy condition and the requirement to remove the lodges after 12 months of vacancy. And again, the appeal was allowed for the same reasons, I'm afraid. Then we're into the last one on Mill Meadow, which was a slightly different thing, but again related to the proposal for a separate dwelling. I should just say that the outcome and the impact of those previous appeal decisions, apart from the first two which were dismissed, the ones that were allowed effectively mean these are market dwellings that could be permanently occupied at Mill Meadow, I'm afraid. Although, on the plus side, they'll count towards our housing land supply, albeit that's probably very small cold comfort, I'm afraid. Yeah. Change, the last one on Mill Meadow was change of use from an annex into a separate dwelling, a Woodcock Lodge. Again, the inspector felt it's not easily accessible and that there will be a reliance on private cars. It's not suitable for market housing, he concluded, and it was contrary to the policies of the local plan. However, the inspector did give great weight to this one, as opposed to the first two appeals, which were brand new dwellings. He noted that it was a change of use of an existing building, which is already an annex to a holiday home. He accepted the appellant's argument that the annex is used as a self-contained unit and occupied independently, and therefore felt there's already some travel associated with the use of the annex, which the inspector felt was unlikely to change as a consequence of the proposal. And then went on to say, having said that, that our policy supports the conversion of holiday homes to full residential. Therefore, he felt that the proposal was supported by policy and that the use of the annex for market housing was acceptable. And then finally, he did take on board phosphate loading, but felt that because it was already independently occupied, that the change of use to a residential dwelling from the annex would not result in any increase in phosphate loading over and above the extant annex use. The next appeal is coming to you, even though obviously I don't manage the enforcement team, but there's an enforcement appeal relating to Hyde Egg Farm, Hyde Lane in Bathpool. The breach of planning control that we alleged in the enforcement notice was the change of use of the land for stationing of 2 mobile homes. The requirements of the notice were to cease the use of the land for the mobile homes for permanent residential occupation, to remove the 2 mobile homes from the land, and 3, to remove all materials and components comprising the 2 mobile homes from the land. So the appeal was allowed and the enforcement notice was quashed. The inspector felt that the two mobile homes for residential use were actually located within a single planning unit for residential purposes, and therefore de facto no change of use had actually taken place by citing them, because they weren't classed as buildings, they're mobile homes, and if they meet the Caravan Act, then and they're used for the same purposes, there's no change of use. The inspector noticed that a personal permission granted in 2004 may have been breached, but also noted that the original permission, and this is a lesson learned for the council, that the original permission did not require that the residential use would cease or the mobile homes needed to be removed when the personal permission ended, which is a good lesson for us in dealing with any personal permissions in the future. So accordingly, the inspector actually said that the matters alleged in the notice did not actually constitute a breach of planning control, and therefore the ground C appeal, which is that the breach has not, as a matter of fact, occurred, that appeal succeeds. Unfortunately, it gets worse. So there was a full award of costs awarded against the council, and the inspector was pretty damning on this, because the inspector said that the council had no reasonable prospect of defending an appeal against the enforcement notices framed, and that we'd also failed to substantiate our reasons for identifying the alleged breach and for issuing the notice. The inspector noted that use of land for which the council sought to attack, which was his word, was the same use which was granted permission in 2004, albeit that was a personal permission. This directly led to the applicant having to pursue an appeal which could have been avoided. The inspector then went on to say that should we have sought to take enforcement action against an alleged failure to comply with the condition attached to 2004 permission, i.e. the condition that required it to be personal use only, or against another alleged breach of planning control, the notice should have been drafted accordingly. The inspector therefore concluded unreasonable behaviour, and that's the only reason you can award costs, resulting in unnecessary or wasted expense as described in the planning practice guidance, had been demonstrated, and that a full award of costs was justified. So some discussions that we'll need to have with the enforcement team and be a cautionary tale. Put it that way. Were there any questions?
Are you at liberty to disclose how much the costs were? I would have thought they would be relatively modest on something like that.
We would be at liberty to, but at the moment, what the inspector says is he invites the appellant to put their costs of their appeal, but it would be full costs of fighting the appeal. Well, it all depends. Well, the chair's just after it will go to a cost clerk. I suppose it would depend on the amount and the value. We can use cost clerk in cases where the costs being sought are excessive. Full disclosure, my partner's enforcement manager, they've just had costs ordered against them on a fairly minor appeal, and I'm not trying to shock you, but they've tried to claim £120,000. So that is going to a cost clerk because, yeah, 1 billion, yeah, 5 billion.
Can I ask about the Kingston St Mary ones, because I think the chair and I are, is scarred the right word? We remember some applications on this particular site, which were, well, anyway, and it just occurs to me that do planning officers feel there is a slight contradiction in the outcomes of the appeals? Because on first reading, I think it, in terms of this reliance on the car, it's okay if it's okay to create a dwelling if it was a holiday cottage before, whereas a dwelling inevitably is going to increase the intensity of use, you would think, whereas a new build is out of court. I just wonder, I struggle with that a little bit, but I don't want to say too much because there's various things going on in my division.
No, that's fine. I understand that. Where the inspector's coming from, having read the appeal decisions, is it's about where you draw the planning balance when you put everything into the mix. The fact that we haven't got 5-year land supply and everything like that, and the inspector felt that where there is nothing there and no associated movements, that's the line that was not prepared. He was not prepared to cross in terms of granting 2 new dwellings. But with the existing ones, he noted that he felt that the existing use and the proposed permanent dwelling use would not result in such a difference in traffic movements than nothing to a new dwelling. But I do understand why it's nuanced, but it all just comes down to where they've drawn that line in the planning balance, and that shows how difficult it is, because and who's to say the inspector's right? At the end of the day, they're just a planner like me who happens to work for the inspectorate rather than for Somerset Council. They're not a brand of super planners, but they make a call, and unfortunately they have the final say. They have the final say. What I'm saying is, it's not like they're not like the SAS or the SBS. They're not a brat. They're literally just people who've applied for. They're just planners like me. Yeah, and Alison's no better a planner than me.
We discussed this earlier, didn't we, Zach? Because inspectors don't always know similar decisions that are being made against a policy unless the appellant or the local planning authority alert them.
If I may, Chair, as an aside, one thing that does strike me as well, and I'm sure Alison will confirm this, is surprisingly, if you did think of them as super planners, the planning inspectorate really doesn't pay very well at all. Their inspectors are not paid particularly well. They do get a nice pension, but apart from that, they're not. It may stop some of the better planners in the country from even applying to go into that part of the civil service. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't dream of going into the civil service.
Not that.
Okay,
Well, that
ladies
was
and
so-
gentlemen, I think,
Chair,
Yeah, you've got someone online who wishes to speak.
all right, I'm so sorry, Andy, I missed your hand.
thank you,
My
Chair.
apologies.
That's okay. Just a quick one on the one about the holiday accommodation. Now, when they've changed from holiday accommodation now to permanent residence. Now,
Yes.
did they look at the sequential tests? Because there's obviously, I can't remember, is it 5 or 7 tests you've got to go through in order to
I
get?
think you'll
to
you'll
get the-
find the planning inspector's word is final, Andy.
No, but did we look at the sequential test? Normally, what we do as a planning authority, we look at, can it be used for social housing? Can it be used for community use? Can it be used for
I'll get
agriculture?
Zach to answer,
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah, you're thanks, Councillor Sully. You're talking about policy DM2
Yeah.
of the core strategy, where you've got the sequential test. The inspector didn't go through that test in great detail, not line by line, but did take a view on the acceptability of a conversion from holiday let to permanent residential development. It's a bit of a hot topic because we're getting quite a few of these through at the moment. And that, as you'll be aware, there have been some appeals where I'm thinking particularly the Rooston one for 100 odd homes, where the inspector said that that policy was out of date and gave no weight to it. I think it's different where you've got one dwelling rather than 100 odd, because the weight to be given to the benefits from 100 odd homes is significantly great more. But they didn't. Yeah, the answer is they didn't go through line by line. But I don't think it would be something that we could. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's something we could seek to challenge the decision on through the court of law.
So therefore, are we saying now that if anyone's got a holiday home, that they could easily get planning permission now to turn it into a permanent residency? Because does this set a precedent, or is it just case by case?
No, case by case. I mean, no doubt, Councillor Sully, that some people try and use it against us, but case by case, yeah.
Okay, lovely. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance today. I look forward to seeing you all on December the 16th. Same venue, same people, but much more interesting. We have several applications that we will need to determine on the day, please.